We're not acting in a wise mind, a wise, mature mind when we deflect. So there's that piece. So you got to know who you're dealing with and what's going on there. And if you handle this poorly, guess what? You're getting an F in how to do conflict for the day, man, because you just made everything worse if you don't handle deflection well. So it matters.
Welcome to another episode of What to Say and How to Say It. My name is Shai. I'm here with Nina, and our mission is to help you, Christian married man or woman, navigate conflict and build connections so you can have a thriving marriage. All right, so today we are discussing what to say when deflection happens. So, just by definition, deflection is, according to Cambridge, when a person attacks or blames another person rather than accepting criticism or blame for their own actions. When someone deflects, they're usually trying to feel less guilty, avoid consequences, and put blame on others. Now, there's also subtle deflection, which I've seen happen often in political conversations, or when you're being sold something, whether it's an idea or a product. So it can definitely be a skill set used in different professions. But the type of deflection we're talking about today is when you're in conflict and when you're trying to get to some resolve or conclusion or just common ground, and you can't get there because something else is being brought up that usually has nothing to do with the issue at hand. So Nina, what are your thoughts around this whole idea around deflection?
Yeah, because I've never done it,
right.
Nor have I ever experienced it, right? At the heart of this is a defensiveness or some sort of malicious intent, right? But whatever it is that's happening in the person that's doing the deflecting is, we're not talking about what you just brought up right now or ever. Like it's a hard no, but they're not using language that's honest and truthful. And they may be doing their absolute best. Like they may not even be aware, this is no joke, that they're turning it on to something else. They just may feel threatened. And what do people do when they feel threatened? They fight back. They fight back. And this is one of those things. So something just came at me and I'm threatened by that. So I'm now going to turn this into something probably about you. Mm-hmm. You do that too, right? Mm-hmm. Well, yesterday you were blah, blah. Well, I wouldn't have done that if you hadn't, all that garbage that goes along with it. And all of that, like, who's your favorite 7-year-old? Like, that's what they do. Anybody that's raised kids for a hot second goes, yeah, that's a thing kids do. They deflect. And they deflect when there's a lack of safety in the relationship. So sorry, but we have also a contribution that's been made there because for whatever reason, there's a lack of perceived safety. So I have to defend myself in this space, right? And a kid that it lives in an environment where they go, well, no, but my sister did it, or yeah, but Johnny told me to, whatever those deflections are, they're not feeling like they can tell the truth. They're not saying they can, be who they are in that moment or whatever. And that's the same thing going on with adults. We're not acting in a wise mind, a wise, mature mind when we deflect. So there's that piece. So you got to know who you're dealing with and what's going on there. And if you handle this poorly, guess what? You're getting an F in how to do conflict for the day, man, because you just made everything worse if you don't handle deflection well. So it matters.
Wow. Now that's a new concept. You mentioned there's contribution even on your part, even if you're not doing the deflecting, there's some contribution you've made to the relationship that has created this lack of safety. And I think that is so, so important because there's usually not awareness around that.
Yeah.
So I want to get into that a little bit, but before I do that, I want to remind our listeners that we have a website, greaterimpact.org, where you can download a free PDF, How to Stop Walking on Eggshells, that will help you in some of these similar situations. So check us out when you have time. All right, as Nina said, if you don't do this well, you're going to end up making things worse, spiraling down probably into no man's land. And that's not what we want. We want to actually start resolving some of these conflicts. So, Nina, I know you said you had a story around this. I'd love to hear about that.
Well, it's a horse related story, but it happened today. And when we started talking about this, I was like, yeah, that's exactly what my horse did. It deflected so I asked it to go over to a fence, and the fence is not electric. Okay. But it looks like one, it's not turned on. And for those of you that think electric fences are cruel and terrible things, they don't actually injure the animals. They just like give them a bit of a wake up call, and they keep them safe and off of a freeway or highway or whatever. They keep them on the property. So they're there for safety. So, but this thing wasn't even going. It hasn't been going for the last 5 years. But the horse I'm riding, his name's Hawkeye. He's amazing. He wanted absolutely nothing to do with this part of the fence. And it was wired a little funny. It looked a little strange. I don't know if that was new or whatever, but he's like, yeah, no, I'm not going over there. So I'm going to go over here. I'm like, no, you're not. Like, so we have this discussion, and I have to keep turning him back towards where we're supposed to go. And he did everything in his power to disagree with me, with where I wanted him to go. And I was just being firm. I wasn't hurting him or anything. I was just asking again and asking again. And then finally he decides, well, if I can't turn away from this, I'm going to pop up. So he lifts his front feet off the ground about a foot or so. And then he's just hopping around. It was really kind of comical, and comical because I could ride it well. Like 2 years ago, something like that from a horse would have scared me half to death. But he's just doing that. I'm like, really? Wow. Okay. And so the trainer's there, and I said, so what do I do with this? He goes, back him up. So I backed him up, and then I gave him a stop, and he just stood there and breathed for a minute. And that was good. And so then we were able to move forward. But the point is that I hung in there with, here's the direction I want you to go. And he's like, yeah, but the fence, and yeah, but what about over here? And how about I just get vertical for a minute? And how about we try this instead?
Yeah.
He was doing everything and people do this in conversation.
Yes. Yes.
You bring up, like, I'll use a teenager example. So, didn't report cards come out last week? Well, and then they start talking about 28 other things. And then they bring in the thing that you did yesterday. You didn't get my clothes washed, so I don't know what I'm going to wear this weekend. And it's like, wait a minute, no, okay, that's all great with all of that. How about we talk about the report cards that came out? So you come back to that, right?
Come back to it. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a thing. It's easy to do when people are not being terrible. It's harder to do when they're like, well, you never da 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 da. Right? Yeah. So if you ask your husband, hey, can you put your dishes in the dishwasher? Well, you never put your dishes in the dishwasher. I'm always picking up after you. And last week you left the car out of the garage and the garage door opened. And suddenly now what are we talking about? Like, nobody knows.
Yeah. Right. That's right. and sometimes it feels like that was the goal. Like, it's like you mentioned at the beginning, well, sometimes people, they're not even aware they're doing it. It does not feel that way. It feels very intentional.
Yeah. And so one of the best things that we can do, because we're not fully responsible for somebody's deflecting response. That is on them. But one thing that we have to take a look at, if we're getting that, is how are we bringing things up with people? Because if we're coming into a space with accusatory communication, like, you never put your stuff in the dishwasher. Why is it? I'm not your mother. That's terrible. Like, are you creating safety with that? I don't think so. Right. Yeah. No. So, hey, baby, I love you. I noticed your cup was on the counter.
Yeah. Totally different.
Yeah, totally different. Are you going to use that again? Or do you mind putting it away? There's just you assume the best, right?
Right.
And if you got a hard topic to discuss, you better make sure it's a good time. is it okay if we talk about what's going on with our bank account? Like, do you want to do that now, or maybe we should do that this weekend? Well, you spent too much money. Yeah, I know. I'm sure I've got some things in here. I think this is a space where we get together and figure out what's going on with our financial situation. Is this weekend good for you, or when do you want to have that conversation?
Mhm.
Well, you've got credit, you've credit cards and yeah, you're right, I do. And we can certainly talk about that. How about 2 o'clock on Saturday? Does that work for you? So you just keep bringing it back. You bring it back. You bring it back. And the interesting thing, this is great with kids, because if you don't do that with them, they learn an easy manipulation tool. It's terrible to let them get away with that. And even with other people, they learn that no matter what I bring up or where I try to go with this, I'm dealing with someone who respects themselves, respects me, and is going to hold my feet to the thing at hand. And it's very relationship protective, because there's this thing called kitchen sinking that just blows up relationships. And that is where somebody says something, maybe it was done well and the other person gets defensive or whatever, but the other person gets defensive. And then they say something back. And now this guy is responding the same way, right? So they're defensive. And so now the 28 things that have happened over the last 7 years now show up. And the infidelity that occurred back in 1997 that he thought was all healed up, no joke, this comes out now again, and so there's just, and suddenly we're not talking about, the overdraft notice we got from the bank. We're not talking about the credit limit being overdone or whatever, exceeded. That's the word I was looking for. We're now talking about everything in the universe is bad. And here's all the examples we can possibly think of it. And it's terrible for relationships. Like, stop that. Don't participate in that ever. Feel really strongly about it. Sorry. One of the worst things people can do.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And it happens so quickly. I'm amazed at how that kitchen sinking dynamic, really happens like within minutes. If you're not aware of your response and you're not aware of who you're talking to and what's happening. So question I have is it ever wise to say, this is deflection, to point out the deflection? Because, I would imagine if there is deflection, admitting to deflection would probably not go well.
Yeah. So, you do, but you do it in a way that isn't labeling the other person as being terrible. It's saying, okay, I can see you have a lot of things you want to talk about. Is it possible to stay on this topic for right now? In the marriage intensive, we really tell people, do one topic at a time. 4 minutes and 30 seconds on that one topic, the end. Like, that's it. Don't talk about 28 things. Talk about one, just one. And when people can't do that, then you go, okay, so seems like you have a lot of stuff you want to talk about. I want to do that. And I'm happy to make a list of those things and we can get to that. What I'd like to do now is this particular thing. Are we able to talk about this particular thing right now? And if that doesn't work, if they're like, no, I can't, because you say, okay, I can see this is a bad time to have a conversation. Honestly, around anything. So let's put this off. I'm going to go pray for a bit. I'm going to ask you to pray also. I'm going to ask you to connect with the Lord around this. And I'm going to come back in a half hour and see if you're up for a 6-minute conversation about what's going on in our checking account. And if you're not up for that, that's fine. Let's just set a time to do it when we're both in a place where we can act like grownups and just talk about what's actually happening here. See, the thing that people don't understand is avoiding conflict makes everything worse. You have to do conflict. The other piece of that is doing conflict badly makes everything worse. So you're not going to be able to navigate life without conflict. You have to do it. Right. But the way you do it matters. And yeah, you got to level up. Like, grow the ever loving heck up. Let's all do that so that we can step into spaces and have hard conversations and do them well. We're supposed to do that.
Mhm.
And here's the thing that makes me crazy is we're so wrapped up in these, well, he did this and then she did that and blah, 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 and it's all stupid stuff. We're spending all this energy on these stupid arguments when we could be living our best life on mission for God, and the enemy has us so trapped up in this garbage
Right.
that we don't even know what we're supposed to do with our life here on planet Earth. And then 30 years have gone by and you're still doing the same stupid stuff. Like, we need to grow up. All of us.
Yeah.
And I'm including myself in that because I've got
Yeah.
spaces where I'm not a grown-up and I'm working on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the way to do that is what we always say is become self-aware, know yourself, do your inner healing.
Mhm.
Because I mean, we can have these conversations, we can give you scripting, we can give you words, but if you haven't done your work, your emotions are going to override all of that.
Yep.
You're going to respond out of that trigger. And what's the use in having the scripting and the what to say? So
exactly.
I'm hearing that, okay, there is a way to handle deflection, but even more important is, have you done your work? Mm-hmm. And the second thing I'm hearing that's really important in this is, have you created a safe environment? Because, oh my goodness, those two things, without that, then it's like, you're not going to get very far. So
no, yeah, you won't. And the part of this that is huge is everybody's like, oh, I'm just so scared that they'll have this reaction. Yeah, they probably will.
Probably
do
will.
it anyway. Do
Mm-hmm.
it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Just because somebody else is going to behave badly doesn't mean that you act without integrity. Doesn't mean that you stop being who you are. Jesus was confrontational as all get out. I mean, come on. And he wasn't terrible about it. He was actually very kind and gentle. And well, except the part where he was like, woe to you, Pharisees. Like, he was mad that, okay, sure, there's some of those, but they deserved it in those moments. And he was God, is God. So it's a little different, right? But we have to choose to do whatever work is necessary so that we can be brave enough to step into hard places verbally in firm, kind, respectful manners. Because if you don't, nothing changes in your relationship. Nothing.
And what a shame to go, like you said, 30 years and you're still fighting over that same overdraft.
Mm-hmm.
No, what a shame. So, all right, I have so many notes that I've taken away. I just want to summarize for our listeners. When you're in a situation where deflection is happening, it can feel very annoying and you don't really know what to do. So what I have taken away is, first, ask yourself, have I created an environment that is safe? What is my contribution to this dynamic? And then if it continues, redirect the conversation back to the main issue. They may go left, they may go right, like Nina's horse analogy. They may even go vertical and take you for a ride. But if you're self-aware, you can always redirect the conversation back. Also, ask yourself, how's my delivery? Am I being accusatory here? Am I believing the best? Is my tone, loving, so that, that deflection is less likely to happen? Is it a good time? Be very, very conscious of the delivery. And then if it continues even still, maybe bring attention to what is actually happening and ask a question around what needs to be discussed. Is there other things to talk about? Yeah, maybe bring it to the person's attention that you'd love to discuss those other things after this particular topic is addressed. And you can always, as we say, take a break. If it just continues, walk away, take a break, pray, seek the Lord, and then come back because it still hasn't been resolved. So, yeah, so lots of options here that you may not have considered before. We hope these are helpful to you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, check out the next one on our YouTube channel. We have even more fun topics like this that we discuss. And our goal is to help you resolve these conflicts in a healthy way, as we said earlier. So thanks for joining today, and we'll see you next time.